thank you for inviting me here. I really want to thank Chris and Andrea and all the team behind the Cloud Native Summit. So as you know, I was kindly introduced, my name is Andrea Magnorsky, and this is some of the experience I've had over time. And I'm bringing this to a little bit of a focus or whatever. Being in big and small companies, I had my own company. I worked inside the companies as a consultant. The thing that gives you really is a lot of experience with things going well, and I think most importantly, things going not so well, because that's actually where you learn the most, right? For example, have you ever been in an incident? Anyone? Yeah? Are they? Never. Are they great crack? Like, do you feel all relaxed and happy to be there? Yes. No. It's terrible. It's really stressful. And it's interesting because what happens in something like an incident, like something that you're trying to bring people together to try to fix something, because what's happening is that we're not sharing mental models. Maybe we don't understand how the system is behaving in this particular way, because otherwise the incident will be instantly resolved, right? So I think a lot of this comes back to lack of shared mental models, right? So I am pretty sure that actually what's happening here is that this is something we need to remember, which is at the end of the day, no matter what we would like to build, what we have built is we're encoding what is in the programmer's brains. And it doesn't help, like, as an industry, we tend to focus so much on how we should fix something that some of the times we kind of forget about why we are building these things and what is it that we're building. I mean, I said this for the first time in 2021. I've obviously just said it again, right? But someone else said something quite similar before. And this is Alberto Brandolini, who said something quite similar in 2019. I find it interesting that the two of us, which is two people that build tools for knowledge sharing with large groups of people, are kind of trying to remind people of how important this is. But why should we care about knowledge? What kind of knowledge do we care about? And why is it that sharing is so important and also so difficult? I mean, can't you just like write it down and just send it through? I mean, that didn't work out so well. So let's start with the first question. We're knowledge workers. That means our capital is knowledge. We have to think for a living, right? So knowledge work is understanding and applying knowledge, which is your experience, values, context, all your heuristics and whatever, in ways that enable your organizations to make effective change, right? So speaking of which, Aaron, who's going to be somewhere around there, he's going to be talking about the experience of being a developer, and that's going to evolve. So how are we going to manage knowledge in this new age? Also a great post by Annie Bellas, if you haven't seen it. But on knowledge workers, everyone in this room is a knowledge worker. And so this should give us a hint. But further, how we think about knowledge. So imagine how much you know is one of these piles. You can be any pile you want. Maybe you're a pile of leaf trees. Maybe you're a bunch of books. In your organization, maybe the leaves of a tree are way more important than the other ones, or not. So if one of these piles of books is knowledge stock, when we talk about knowledge flow, that is basically the ability to transfer knowledge between people or between people and systems so that you can make change to your system. So when you have knowledge flow, your organization acquires effectiveness. When you have knowledge stock, your organization gets efficiency. And obviously, you need some balance of both, right? So this is on what kind of knowledge and what should we think about knowledge. Further, we're an industry that thrives and needs innovation. So this is a paper from Liao, which is a well-known writer on this thing. And I'm giving you this snippet on how important knowledge transfer is, because it is a crucial determinant of the organization capacity to innovate and use the knowledge, obviously. So that's on the why knowledge and why should we care. And so we get to why is it so hard, right? So the thing is that knowledge sharing should be simple, but it's not. There's a bunch of things. If you work in a company, you will find that your team changes. Some people leave, maybe lots of people leave, maybe they just go somewhere else, I don't know. Coordinating between teams. Obviously, the people that have left are not there to give you their knowledge. You can't tap them on the shoulder. Coordinating within teams, it takes longer. Their knowledge about your system is fuzzy and incorrect, outdated. And maybe you can iterate on that and do something. Then also conflicting long-term plans. Plans change over time, and coordinating those is actually quite difficult. So those are all why sharing is hard. And on the other side of non-time dependent issues, you have power. I'm sure you've experienced this. You're in a meeting, and depending on who's there, certain information is shared or not. And then something that we talk about, I think, too little, is that depending on the role you're playing, not so much so your title, you share information in a completely different way because you're thinking about different things. Imagine you're a tester. The way you think about your systems tend to be quite different than if you are into product, like you represent the user, or if you're a programmer when you're trying to build something, right? So you're just thinking differently, and so you communicate differently, which makes sense. So this is why knowledge sharing is complicated. And so to try to ameliorate, to kind of minimize this, we use all these different sharing methods today. And what you use in your organization is a combination of those, something that works for you. As Andreas and Hanil were saying earlier, it's all about something that suits you, right? So on these knowledge sharing mechanisms that you have, some of them give you more or less feedback. And I find that it's very important to, when you're sharing knowledge, for example, I'm talking to you, right? And some of you will absorb loads of this, and some of you are thinking, oh no, my cat is bored and he's missing me and I miss him, and that's okay and it's normal. So the problem is that I don't have feedback on those of you thinking about your cat, fair enough. But if we're working together, and trying to build stuff together, you will be a lot more focused, and we will be building this knowledge together, because everyone learns at the same time. So I think you want something that is more like a collaborative thing. And so workshops. This is exactly where Bytesize Architecture Session falls on the workshop side of things. So it's nicely highlighted for you. And the idea of that is that the name tries to remind you that this is bite-sized, small, it's short, and it's something that you do a lot. So it's sessions, which is not session. So Bytesize Architecture Sessions is a workshop format, right? And the reason for that generic T there, for those of you that go into programming, is because you can use any modeling technique that you want, right? So Bytesize is a collection of highly collaborative meetings that has an enabling format. So there is some restrictions applied there so that you focus on what you're trying to do. It takes between 45 and 90 minutes. Size limit of about 10, and you have strategies to deal with larger groups, but the actual session, no more than 10 people. And most importantly, it's recurrent. So you can run a series of sessions to achieve certain goals. You might be wondering, why is the emphasis on modeling? And we are talking a lot about systems thinking so far in this conference, which I really love. So if you've never seen this book, I recommend you to get your phones out and buy it. And the reason for that is because this is a primer on really what are systems, why we should care, how do we understand the world in a different way. So coming back to why we focus so much in models, in diagrams. The reason for that is that when you talk, you are forced to have some sort of linear coherence. Otherwise, it would be quite difficult to communicate. However, the systems happen all at once. They just happen. Like all this simultaneous communication is happening, and that helps us parse as humans a little bit better. So I like to think that this is how I can explain Bytesize Architecture Session. And this talk is called The Deliberate Practice of, and that will be session prep and after a week of 2. That's deliberate practice. And thinking about your system is those session goal, along together, consensus, summary. Right? So that's why this talk is called that. So session prep, you literally invite the right people, and obviously, who are they? It depends. And you make sure that they're ready. Whatever modeling technique you're going to use, you need to make sure that they know how to do it, right? No surprises. On the day of the session, you spend 2-3 minutes on the goal, and you make sure everyone knows what's happening next. And then you go to Alone Together. Now, Alone Together is, you set up a 3-minute timer, and during that time, you work on the session goal. So this is a very small thing, right? So you go into it, but you're working on your own with the other people in the same physical or virtual room. After the timer elapses, each one takes turns explaining what they just did, while everyone else listens actively. That means that they are quiet, right? And this might be a bit strange, but what you're doing here is basically this quiet time allows you to actually get into the workshop. I don't know what are your circumstances, but a lot of people have a lot of meetings, and when you run from one meeting to the next, getting into actually working can be difficult, and this time really lets you get into that. The second thing is because you're actually working on something yourself, it allows you to self-evaluate, to introspect into what you're doing, and you realize that you know more or less than you thought, which is always refreshing, a dose of reality. There's higher engagement levels for what's happening next. And finally, because you're listening to the other people in this meeting, and you really get the opportunity to see the world, this slice of the world from their eyes. And it lets you see the system in completely different ways, which is very refreshing. After Alone Together, you have consensus, which is the longest part of this. And that is where you do exactly the same thing you did on your own, but from scratch, and with all the insight, and you do it together. So obviously, this takes a lot longer than what you just did. But you build something, and you try to find some sort of common ground. I call it consensus, but don't let that distract you from the fact that disagreement should exist. Finally, you have summary, which is like a small retro on what just happened. So that's it. It's quite simple, right? And I think it's a quite simple thing to try. If you try it, if you go tomorrow to your company and say, let's try one of these, you'll take 1 hour, and the worst that can happen is that you learn something. So I think, pretty good deal, I think. And so if you're wondering what it feels like, Jim Taylor, a good friend of mine in ITV, this is his take after the first Bytesize session he did. And I really love the way he explained this, in that the main thing I took away from today is that everyone brought something, and that enabled everyone to learn something new, which is amazing. I think really that if you are into co-op board games, anyone into board games? Yeah, there you go. We can be friends. Actually, we're all friends, it's good. But this feeling of you working, everyone in the room working towards a problem, rather than what happens in meetings a lot, some antagonistic fashions, being more important, the fight between each other, like changing the dynamics is where I really think this helps. So why do this? Well, you're trying to grow a kind of more congruent system understanding. You have an enabling format. Some restrictions can be very enabling. And finally, and this was really a surprise for me, because you're working on different diagrams, you start building a library of models of diagrams that everyone actually agrees on, or at least has a good idea of where they came to be, rather than here's the truth without a lot of context. At least people had at minimum, people had a chance, and at best, they actually were the key architects of this. Ultimately, I really have experienced this. This is a way to build an architecture practice in a safe way. Because what's better than to iterate and learn how to discuss systems together, right? So, when do you use this? Again, this is typical cases that I've seen multiple times. Take that. You acknowledge problems, so you do a series of sessions to acknowledge problems, that learn actually what those problems really are, and then what would the future, the ideal future, look like? And then, how do we get there? Alternatively, you have an evolving team. Maybe a lot of people left. You still have some there. You still need a system, and it still needs to work. Well, you start by acknowledging what's there, acknowledging what we know, share it, and work on the bits that are missing together, right? And finally, big changes. I don't know, there's an acquisition, big changes. Again, you map the current, understand the difficulties, and iterate, again, towards optimal solutions. If you have any of these problems, please let me know. I'd love to see what your problems are and see if I can help you with this. So I kind of thought maybe you're now, oh, yeah, this sounds interesting. I don't know how it works. So I'm going to drive you through, quite quickly, through a case study of a company's first Bytesize Architecture Session. I ran this in a broadcasting organization in the UK. And the problem they had is half of their team was new. So the leadership wanted to help the team move a little bit faster. And they understood that that happens when people understand what they're doing better and what is the context they're working on. So before the session, we decided to invite everyone on the stand-up. And I suggested they use C4, which is c4model.com. Just go and check it out if you don't know what it is. Or obviously, I'm around for later if you want to know. The team lead was going to teach them. It's basically an evolution over books and arrows. So that's what we decided. On the day, we ran online using an online collaboration board. Easily, you can run this in person, too. And remember, this is the 4 steps that we're going to be doing, right? So at the very start, these participants were there. Everyone was ready to go. They had learned some C4. And we said, all right, we're going to create a context diagram of the system as it is today. Not in 3 weeks, not in 3 months, today, or even better, last week, right? So everyone was ready. And we did along together. Set up the timer lapsed. Each one of these really cute guys, this bear and bunny, etc., they all talked about the systems as they see it. And I want to tell you something else. These are blurred out screenshots of what they actually did, right? So if you can even look at them lightly, you can see that these diagrams are quite different. Some of them don't even have lines between them. Obviously, it doesn't look like a system context diagram. There's less or more components, and that's OK. Like, the whole point is that we learn together. Also, interestingly, Bunny brought ideas that nobody else thought about. Bunny also wasn't a programmer. And they felt like, oh, maybe my contribution is not worth it, but actually it was one of the most useful ones. Because you're getting a different perspective. Like, diversity of perspective, so important. So, Alone Together was finished after not long, and we got into consensus. So the team drew part of the system, but the session finished. The strong time box is super important. The session ended before they were done. So we go to summary, and this is their, like, I nearly took screenshots of the sticky notes, but I thought this is more readable. So they learned a lot more than they expected. So they had some expectations about what could you learn in an hour, and this was a lot more than they thought. The format really helps them focus and be present in this workshop. And they also were like, oh, we need to finish this, which is really good. And they kind of started already thinking about what they should model next without prompting. I mean, that's a pretty nice engagement model, I think. Finally, iterate, which is, I think, is a theme of the conference, iterate. So in here, you probably want to review guests and also discuss possible goals. So on iteration and that, I also want to think that I'm looking forward to Jason's talk later, where he's going to talk about this SDLC. And I'm looking forward to him talking how we can incorporate practices like this to our everyday life cycles. So I'm sure you're super curious to learn more about Bytesize, like this cat. An excuse to have a picture of a cat, I think. But if you want to learn more about other people's experience of that, please go there and have a look. And this is my reminder to pause for a second and maybe have some water, because I've been talking a lot. And also, Kias are really nice. They are amazing, aren't they? So, Bytesize on books. So, chapter 17 has Bytesize, and also if you're having architecture modernization problems, this book is amazing. Also, this is on collaborative software design. So if you're new to this kind of collaborative approaches, this book is a masterclass on how to try many of those and what works and what doesn't. Obviously, it's in the open practice library as a couple of days ago. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. And as Andreas and Hanil mentioned, one really, really important thing here is this practice and a lot of collaborative practice. When you work with people, it sometimes feels like you're kind of herding cats. It's like, please, come on, let's get some stuff done, friends. And that's kind of normal because we all have different goals and stuff. But it's really important to focus and make sure that you have these foundational pieces. I think that the most important two for me are to have psychological safety and a growth mindset. What I mean by that is to say that it's really hard to learn something if you don't think you have anything to learn. Also, it's really hard to learn something if you feel that nobody ever listens to you. So you're part of a group, and it's your responsibility to make those two things happen. You have to do something for yourself and also to do something for others. And to finish, I want to, if you're thinking about systems, Ross Ackhoff is an excellent was an excellent system thinking. And there is the source of this quote is like a 10-minute TED talk on systems. And he says that a system is not the sum of its parts, it's their interactions. And here, I want you to think about the fact that it's people-to-people interaction, people-to-software interaction, and software interactions. All of those interactions matter. And Bytesize is where, and Bytesize and other similar practices, event storming, impact mapping, a lot of stuff that is on the open practice library, they are all about trying to enable those. Ultimately, knowledge sharing is systems building. With that, thank you very much.